Every time you walk across a room, think through a problem, or simply draw a breath, your body is burning through immense amounts of energy. But your cells cannot simply conjure that power out of thin air. To see where that energy comes from, we have to zoom deep inside a cell and look at a specialized extraction facility, the mitochondrion. Looking at this 3D model, you can see a mitochondrion is organized into nested layers. A smooth outer membrane encases the structure, while a highly folded inner membrane, made of folds called Cristae, wraps around an interior space known as the matrix. Trapped between these two borders is the narrow intermembrane space. Together, these specific compartments allow the mitochondrion to perform cellular respiration. This is the process of breaking down energy-rich molecules from your food and transferring their stored power into a usable chemical form called ATP. This diagram illustrates exactly how ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, functions like a rechargeable energy card. When a cell needs power, ATP releases energy by snapping off its final third phosphate group, leaving behind a depleted molecule called ADP. The mitochondrion's primary survival function is to act as a continuous recharging station. It takes the raw fuel extracted from your meals and uses it to force that third phosphate back onto ADP, restoring it into fully charged active ATP. That recharging process begins with glucose, a 6-carbon sugar derived from food. Initially, this raw fuel sits outside the mitochondrion, in the cell's main fluid called the cytoplasm. Out here in the cytoplasm, a process called glycolysis splits that single 6-carbon glucose into 2 smaller molecules called pyruvate. This split yields a tiny amount of immediate ATP, and it transfers a few high-energy electrons onto molecular carrier vehicles. But to get a serious energy yield, those 2 pyruvate molecules must relocate. They move inward, physically crossing both membranes to enter the deep, glowing interior space of the mitochondrial matrix. Inside the matrix, each pyruvate undergoes a strict chemical preparation. It sheds one of its carbon atoms, which drifts away as carbon dioxide waste, leaving behind a new 2-carbon molecule called acetyl-CoA. This preliminary phase of splitting the sugar and shedding that first carbon atom provides the specific 2-carbon structures required to feed the main energy harvesting cycle inside the matrix. That prepped 2-carbon molecule now drops into the citric acid cycle, a continuous rotating loop of carboxyl reactions running inside the matrix. As this cycle turns, it systematically strips away the remaining carbon atoms that originally belonged to glucose. These discarded carbon atoms form the carbon dioxide gas that enters your bloodstream and is eventually exhaled by your lungs. Interestingly, the cycle itself barely produces any direct ATP. Its actual function is to harvest and concentrate high-energy electrons. Looking at this diagram of the rotating pathway, you can see carbon breaking away, while specialized transport vehicles, specifically molecules called NADH and FADH₂, fill up with those extracted electrons. Once fully loaded, these electron carriers become a highly combustible fuel source. They are now perfectly primed to power the final, most extreme stage of energy production at the inner membrane. The loaded carriers transport their payloads directly to the electron transport chain, a sequential line of protein complexes embedded tightly within the inner mitochondrial membrane. The carriers drop off their cargo, and the electrons begin jumping from one protein complex to the next. With every movement along the chain, they gradually release their stored energy. This cross-section shows how the mitochondrion harnesses that kinetic energy. As the glowing electrons move horizontally between the embedded shapes, their energy is used to forcefully pump positively charged hydrogen ions vertically upward, out of the matrix and into the narrow intermembrane space above. Soon, that narrow space becomes intensely crowded. This massive buildup of positive charge creates an electrochemical gradient. It operates exactly like water trapped behind a concrete dam, holding a vast amount of stored pressure and potential energy. Because hydrogen ions cannot slip back through the inner membrane on their own, the intense pressure forces them to seek the only available escape route back into the matrix, a highly specialized protein called ATP synthase. This protein operates quite literally as a microscopic biological turbine. As the trapped hydrogen ions violently rush through its center, the sheer physical force causes the structure to rotate at high speeds. This sequence, known as oxidative phosphorylation, converts chemical pressure into raw mechanical rotation, which provides the force needed to join ADP and phosphate into the cell's ultimate energy currency. But this high-speed machinery has a fatal vulnerability. If the depleted electrons sitting at the end of the transport chain are not continuously cleared out, the sequence will instantly jam. The pumping stops, the gradient collapses, and ATP production crashes. This is exactly why oxygen is an absolute necessity. Oxygen serves as the final electron acceptor. It steps in to catch those spent electrons at the end of the line, combining with them and a few stray hydrogen ions to form harmless water. This microscopic chemical bottleneck translates directly to your physical experience. When you sprint and your muscles demand maximum power, you breathe heavily because your body desperately needs to pull in enough oxygen to keep those cellular turbines from jamming. With the turbines spinning clearly, vast quantities of newly minted ATP pour out of the mitochondria. As you can see in this stylized cutaway, that energy radiates outward, providing the raw power needed to keep your heart beating, your brain firing, and your muscles contracting. Complex biological life depends on this four-step conversion chain: splitting glucose, harvesting electrons, building a pressure gradient, and spinning a molecular turbine. Mitochondria do not conjure energy magically. They operate as masterful mechanical engineers, taking the raw fuel you consume and meticulously converting it into the exact molecular currency that makes human existence possible. Follow numbers for more visual science explanations and see how the smallest structures power the biggest processes in your body.